Hi everyone, I am here today with Rob Jones and I am so excited about this one because this is exactly what I started the Tudor Tracker for, is to meet more people and see what we can find out about them and what it is they do. So I'm really excited about this. It's so nice to meet you and thank you so much for taking your Saturday morning out to come and spend chatting with me. I really, really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Catherine. I appreciate very much you helping out. It means a lot. Thanks.
And we're making new friends all the time, which is perfect. So the first thing I want like you to do is tell everybody about you and what you do and your background so that we get to know you a little bit better.
Okay, fine. I'm here, of course, because I've recently written the first two books in a trilogy, which we'll probably talk about later. I have a background that is there they are, books on sale now. On sale
Yeah.
now. I have a background both in entertainment and education, and entertainment came first. As a child, practically, I was a musician. I was a bass player along with my brother, and we worked very, very regularly as musicians. And I've been a professional musician all my life and still am. And that's what led into the writing later on. In my other career, I became a teacher. I did a joint honours degree in history and in art and design as well. And I taught that at all levels, including some undergraduates, but sixth form and school. And most of my career, I settled in a school where I taught the subjects and was a head of year and a head of department. But around the age of 40, when I was asked to go into management, I didn't want to. So I had a business. And that business started really by, because I was in a band at the time, I was doing well and was writing with somebody else. And we were looking at really writing routines for people who performed on stage or even if they're getting into TV. And one day I was on holiday with my kids on an all-inclusive family holiday, and I realised this was tours. The staff were struggling in terms of entertainment. They had no resources. Most men had any training. So that became our business for all the major tour operators and theme parks, places like that. We would write shows, we would train them, record all the music, we'd write songs. And that's where I started writing. And it's interesting, really, that I've had a chance to just write now, because I was sort of writing to briefs. You know, you had to hit certain themes, like if it was a holiday abroad, it might be using your suntan lotion or so, including a character. For adults, there were parameters, what you could write and what you couldn't do. So that's where my writing started, and I loved that. It was the best job in the world. I mean, it's just great going to a resort in this country or abroad and you sit down and you watch somebody perform your show and everybody's laughing. So I love things that are light and humorous. I'd like to think my books are like that because I think it engages people.
Yeah.
I hated school. So when I was a teacher, that entertainment part of me thought it's not that different. If you go in a room with young people, you have an obligation to engage them, you know, and I'm still involved in that now, even though my business was very successful, but I got real back into education locally. And so much so that I was offered a job that at first I said, I can't do, you know, I'm running a business, so forth. But I live in a local authority where we were hitting some big records like teenage pregnancies, kids out of school and so forth. We even had quite high sickness and death rate for young people. So I was involved in the management and creation of strategies in which we could engage young people who are on the periphery, people disaffected, disengaged, families that were disengaged. So I worked with the families as well. And the bit I haven't mentioned is my background in technology. All the time I was in school, I mean, you can tell from my age, that was a while ago, but we were some of the first people to introduce computer school in Lancashire. And as we're all historians, you can't imagine what that was like. People would come up to me and say, what the hell would we want one of those in a classroom for? What do we need these? That was what it was like then. It was a battle. So part of the reason I got this job was that I've been using applied technologies in education. And the first thing I did was create an online community that was secure for all the young people and the families and the staff. And it was a 24/7. So some of the interesting things that came out of that were, for instance, that we learned that some of our young people that were unteachable would actually get online about 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and they'd do a good 3 hours as long as there was a teacher there to support them, a chat to them, and so forth. So It was very successful, and I did that for about 15 years. And of course, as part of that, and as part of my life as a teacher, I've seen all sorts of things. Sometimes things I wouldn't like to know, and I work with a lot of terminal children, young children as well. And there's a very, very needy society out there in Britain, an unbelievable one. I always say a different world. I often said to people, if you lived in this world I did, you wouldn't have the views that you had. So that colours what I write a little bit.
Yeah.
And in my writing, there's a lot of what if, what if you had mental health problems? What would if you're autistic in the 1540s? What if your sexuality wasn't like everybody else's? Without what I don't like historically is when you watch something or read something and it's looking at past through 21st century goggles, because I don't think we can do that. But at the same time, all these things were around. So I stopped doing that a few years ago. I'm still involved with young people who are out of school, out of the education system completely, a little bit. I do that part-time, but otherwise I still work as a musician and I write as well. That's a potted history of Rob.
So where did you, this is where we always talk about people and then say, okay, so what got you most specifically really into Tudor history? Because a lot of people have quite a broad base of topic, not like history, that they're interested in. Some people sort of pick one area. So, but what is it about Tudor history? Where did you find it and how did it draw you in?
I think this is something we've talked about, isn't it? There's some connect about these almost larger than life characters that exist in the 16th century that almost everybody can at least say a sentence about, even if they think they don't know anything about history. They know something about Henry VIII or Elizabeth and so forth. One of the strange things happened when I was doing what were O levels then and A levels, and then when I started my degree, we seemed to be knee deep in 19th century history, which I very much enjoyed. I loved, and I loved doing work on. Again, when I did a dissertation, I was working on what happened with children in industries in the Northwest at that time. So I loved all of that. But I'd always enjoyed this period. So it was almost like this closet sort of enjoyment that while that was going on, I was reading a lot about, if I'm honest, 16th, 17th centuries as well. I always loved those periods. And I had an opportunity to take a course on that. And when I did postgraduate work, that was very, very much about looking at history as detective work, as evidence-based. So I was able to do a lot of work on 16th century, and as much as possible about more everyday people rather than the big names as such. And I think it stuck. When I started to write, it did happen in a very strange way, to be honest, how I started writing again. But I fell into it very easily. I was painting first, and my wife, bless her, is my biggest supporter. I was painting, and she said, "Oh, that's cool. And you'll get this, nobody else will." But, I'd seen a field mouse.
Oh, I know, the illustrations. This is tiny, 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 so I don't know if people can see it. But it's so cute. That's not the only illustration, everybody.
So I said, yeah, and I literally just said, so I just got this field mouse, and I said, yeah, I said, and he's in York, and it's the 16th century. So that was it. That was a seed. Somewhere in here, I thought, when I'm writing, it's the 16th century. So, and I think as well, if you write about the Wars of the Roses, this isn't necessarily about a sales pitch. I do like to engage people. You won't find as many people you could connect with on different levels. I think it's an easier period to talk about the Tudors. And there's so much goes on. There's so much to talk about. I mean, literally, you can still, how much has been written about Anne Boleyn? And we could put four of us in a room and we'd still throw all sorts of ideas around about them, wouldn't we? So, these are fascinating people, the like of which I'm not sure we've got now.
No, I don't think we will, which is a good and a bad thing.
Yeah, we've got people doing all sorts of dodgy stuff, but they're not that interesting.
No. Well, yeah, it's not quite the same. People will look back at this period in time in a very, very different way, but that's a whole other conversation. So you talked a little bit about, you've mentioned snippets here and there about your writing and your writing style. So when people, I said to you yesterday, I've got to try and talk about this without giving too many spoilers. But you've already mentioned that, like, your writing is quite quirky and it's quite fun. And I think I said to you, I read like quite a lot of non-fiction. And so it was quite nice for me to take that time to read a novel, a Tudor novel. And it's so sweet and it's so endearing. And there were bits where I messaged you and said, I've just really laughed at this particular piece here.
Yeah, that was
And
great. Thanks. Yeah.
so it's lovely, because it really felt nice to sit and read something like that. It felt like a real treat to sit and read it, and I loved it. And to me, if anybody's read any Tom Sharp, who people tend to know for Wilts and Porterhouse Blue
Yes.
and Blot on the
Yes.
Landscape, there was a bit of an
Porterhouse
air
Blue.
of Tom Sharp about it to me.
Well,
And
thank you. That's very
I
nice.
loved it. So I've got to try not to give too much away because I get a bit excited. But you've mentioned the little mouse, who
Yeah.
is our hero, isn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he writes mostly from the first person, but he's
Yes.
also observing, isn't he? The scenes
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
he isn't in, he's kind of narrating the
Yes.
scenes. So is he like your voice? Is he the voice that you write with as such?
Yes, I think he is, and I think we had a laugh when we said we were talking at home once, and I said, and I won't try and do an impression, but I can do a reasonable impression. But I said he's a bit Sean Bean as a mouse. He's not like a little sweetie little mouse,
No.
because and you know, you're absolutely right. I'm going to do this. This is sort of an exclusive, because I don't talk. I don't want. I sort of want there to be surprises, so
Yeah,
I don't talk much about spoilers. But I will give the framework, because it's hard to talk about it otherwise. Because people are already saying, "Why the hell is a mouse in it?" And the premises, because I think we're going to talk about some of this. This first of all is that I'm fascinated about how we research history, how we talk about history, and how, you know, very little, even in the best trials in the world, there's very rarely proof. You get lots of evidence, then people make a decision. And, you know, that I see history like that. So there's a sense in which we are, we think about what the future of this might be like. How do people then start having a fresh look at things that we take for granted? They will want to find more and more evidence. So there's a notion that in the future we have a historical analytic society, and they're dabbling. It's not a future where we got time travel. One of the headlines is there's no time travel, but they're dabbling with the sort of technology we have now, in so much as I didn't purposely rob this, but to be fair, Sim, have you seen the film Avatar? That's the idea, that they are in a place where they can access visually and orally some parts of the past. But as it presents itself, the guy who's like at the top of his profession sees himself as a mouse. They're not. It's not polished enough yet to be able to present as this guy who's Dr. Nick Douglas. So his personality changes as well. And I like that. I had a lot of fun with it. And one of the first people that wrote my book was my lovely mother-in-law. And she said, I got to that bit. She said, I thought it was a bit, she said, I read it all. It was lovely. And she said, but some of those words in there, Rob says, and I said, no, it's not me. I said, it's not. I said, the idea is that, you know, he's this grumpy, you know, little character who can't control his temper and how he feels and says about things, and he reacts as such. And, you know, you imagine if, instead of being who you are, suddenly you become a plaything of Culpeper and Catherine Howard, and you're in a cage and they're dressing you up, how are you going to react? So if you're thinking silly, yeah, there's a bit of silliness in there, but there's some, you know, it's rooted in real history. And the big headline really is that I'm very, very interested in real people of the time, because we really talk about them. And yesterday, in fact, somebody, a guy who's very kind about me, I told you, he went to York to seek out all the places, because all the places and it still exists. Thought, wouldn't that be funny? People can visit everywhere. And like one of the characters, again, who I have a lot of fun with, Mayor Robert Hall, he's a real guy, you know. Quite a few of these are real, and some are fictional, you know. And if you want to go to the trouble of finding out who's who, but yeah.
So yeah, I love Micklegate Mouse. I think in terms of the humour, it's quite dry, and he's a little bit sarcastic, and you can
That's
feel,
probably me a little bit,
you can
yes.
feel the frustration in him sometimes, going, "Oh God, where did we get these people from? Give me strength, just give me strength." So, So we're kind of, I'm just looking at here at my notes and sort of picking where I want to go, because I don't want us to go over. So you were saying, when we were talking about how the more disadvantaged people in society, so we come back down to the real people, the people that maybe have a physical, so a more of, they wear their disability, but also different things like autism, and really sort of people that maybe have got some learning difficulties, and in those days would maybe be classed as a bit simple or something like that because of lack of understanding. And we see a real mixture of characters and personalities, and the one that stands out to me the most, I suppose, is Wynne.
Yes.
And then you've got Silas, who's kind of like, is perceived almost like as the village idiot. I
The
think
village. That's where it starts. He's a village idiot.
Yeah. So in terms of them, because they're actually quite endearing, aren't they?
I would like to think so. Yeah. I
Yeah,
love
you
them.
painted them as strong characters who don't realize sort of their own strength, but then you see, you see their vulnerable side as well. So when you were writing them as characters, what were you hoping to put across? What were you hoping to portray and teach people about them and about their counterparts in that time period, the people that faced the same issues that they did?
If you think, I was talking about this job I had when I worked with all sorts of young people, and I was in quite a senior position. I was once with the council leader, and he had a rant about why these people not in school and all. And I just had to explain to him. I said, "You have no idea the depth of the problems that some human beings had." And I said, "You don't even need to be sympathetic, but it's a reality. You take them out of a certain place too quickly, it's going to cause all sorts of problems for other people." And I was interested, as we converse, these issues that people have always been there. And there's a scene in it where, in the book, where Winfrith is looking out a Barley Hall window and it's raining and she's daydreaming. And she's thinking about the times in her life when somebody said something hurtful. And I don't like saying this has happened to me this week. Somebody said something hurtful. And sometimes it stays with you now. Sometimes it's a day, a week you're thinking about it. And she thinks, I wonder if anybody else feels like that. And 200 miles away, Silas is feeling the same thing about something else. That in reality, most of us feel these things at some time. And in reality, everybody on the planet probably has more in common. We have, to fall out about, though we tend to do this the news tends to do this polarization all the time. So writing, I was doing a lot of what if. So I think one thing, which might not be popular me saying this, but I don't particularly like tokenism. I don't want to just say, oh, well, potentially there's this strapping bloke who was a mercenary, but he's possibly gay. And, write a story as if I'm writing it as somebody in the 21st century. He's somebody he's very, very protective of this. And when he's fond of somebody else like Silas and they have an embrace, he goes, oh, I'm really sorry. And nobody knows what he's talking about, And eventually, here's a spoiler, book 2, Silas goes so sensitive, he gets it. He said, I know what you're talking about. And God loves you. He loves you like he loves me. And there must have been people somewhere who connected on a level. That's what I'm writing about as well. This idea that so much is about faith in the 16th century. And yet the core of that faith is this bloke, this nomad wandering around saying, love each other, love your enemies, forgive people, include everybody. There's no exceptions. And Silas is so thick, he gets it. And so do the others. These ordinary people get it. Why can't we be like that? And at the end, she ministers to the king even, doesn't she?
Yeah.
She sort of softens to him in all his problems, So it is that idea. It's the what ifs, and yeah, I think Silas is probably somewhat autistic too.
Yeah.
And of course, I work with autistic kids, and I've laughed at the things they do, and sometimes they don't mind if you laugh, because there's a connect that they say or do things in an unusual way. But in a sense, I just couldn't help doing that, and Elspeth ends up going in a different direction. She has these amazing strengths and connects into something different. I'm not giving that away. You'll have to read it. Connects into something else. But it's trying to break down those, I suppose, those prepositions, those ideas that everybody has of something, like one I have, right? For instance, is that I'm an aging white male in Britain. So people presume things about my politics and what I think and what I, yeah, they're nearly always wrong. And we all do that. So I was trying to write in that way that, you know, there are all these little hearts in all these people. And even Robert, the mayor, who's confused in the first book, and he's up to all sorts of stuff, you know, he's more interested in money than anything else, because he was very rich, glass merchant, Robert Hall. He comes into his own as well. So I have to stop sometimes. And I think people say, don't they, you have to have conflict in books. And of course there's conflict, there's bad guys and stuff. But, you know, it's this living your life and trying to see the good in other people. And I suppose that's what I'm doing when I'm writing, without everybody being sweet and everything being perfect. You know?
Yeah, because life's not like that, is it?
No.
But also, I mean, I know it's called the Cataclysm. I always say that wrong. But that's not to say that everyone in it was a really awful person. It was about an event. And there's actually very few real baddies in it.
No.
But you'll know who they are. If you read it, you'll know who they are.
Yeah, and where they are, I've tried to at least give a sense of where they're coming from, why they're like that. You know, so,
which is very typical behaviours for those periods.
Yes.
Yeah, they were in doing, I feel like so cryptic now, but in doing what they were doing, they were just behaving very in time with the period. They weren't unusual in their dastardly deeds.
Yeah.
So,
well, one of the things I've mentioned that we touched on earlier is that, you know, there is this constant worry about what happens now that he's supreme head of the Church of England. We're not part of Rome. What happens to Catholicism? But Henry's still quite Catholic. And so you've got these people who are driving for Protestantism and can't wait for Edward to be on the throne. And yet there's this Catholic murmuring, which I've just been writing about as well. And at the same time, what we talked about before, you know, surviving Plantagenets, people are thinking, can we just get rid of this lot like we used to? You know, can we get enough armies? So it is very, very complex, and nobody could have felt comfortable, to be honest. And you can sort of even understand Henry's paranoia, can't you?
Yeah, definitely. It's just a world of deceit and backstabbing and uncertainty, and not really, even though you're at the top of the tree, it's not really much fun, really.
No.
So okay, so there's some bits I wanted to read out of the book here. So if people will have the book at all, or are going to buy the book, available on Amazon, these are around about page 101, something like that. And the reason that I wanted to read them is because they really, really struck me. And this is something that you mentioned when your mouse goes back, and he's talking about when the period when he's having also like a flashback or a flash.
That's right. He's having a flashback
when he's in the modern
electric.
world. Yeah, while he's sleeping in his little box back in York in the 16th century amongst the smells. The smells very vivid in this book. Very vivid. So if you're like me, I was like, oh my God, that sounds vile, which it's supposed to sound vile because it was. But I've spoken when I've done some of these other talks and in posts that I've done about accuracy when you are doing historical novel writing, historical fiction. And we have to kind of fill in the gaps sometimes because we don't know. And if you're telling a story from a specific angle and something's a little bit different, like you are, how much people stray an awful lot sometimes. And sometimes that's okay, but there's often not a lot of accountability, or people read things and they forget perhaps that even when someone's writing non-fiction, it's still their story to an extent, which is what people do. That's not necessarily a criticism, it's just what people do, which is why it's a good idea to sort of read quite widely. So there's a few bits here, and the first says, in some sense, history doesn't really exist. Until recently, we have had no way of touching it or referencing it, because obviously if you're thinking that he's speaking now, he's sort of in more recent history, maybe 100 years or so. So until recently, we've had no ways of touching or reference it directly, but surprisingly, every hour we gauge as a society and as individuals with historical notions and considerations, brushing against it consistently in the form of entertainment, reference, and as a comparison to who and where we find ourselves in the present. It has often been done in a fanciful way, projecting modern politics, ideals, and fashions on another age, misrepresenting intention, building an evidential tower out of 3 or 4 bricks of information, and sometimes conjuring outright lies for the convenience of a few. Albert Hubert quite famously said, "History is gossip well told." Napoleon agrees, history is a set of lies agreed upon. H.L. Mencken, have I said
Yeah.
that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Describes the historian as an unsuccessful novelist. And Will Durant tells us most history is guessing and the rest is prejudice.
It does go on.
I know. Our traditional approach as historians would be to access and collate any information we could, and most conscientious historians would rely usually on primary sources to create a fair and balanced interpretation of events. However, long ago it became clear that even the most dependable photograph and film footage could be doctored, leading to mass conspiracy theories about almost anything. It's simple, isn't it? Where humans are involved, there isn't just a margin of error, but also the misinformation we get due to people's own need to dramatize, embellish, and claim part of an event as one's own. In fairness, people's memories sometimes are simply not reliable. So there's a lot there, and I've only sort of taken bits of it, but it really, really struck me that, as you know, you're presenting a novel and you're doing it in a very different take because you're this little mouse, and his part in this bringing down of the Cataclysm, and but those things just really, really struck me as important things to remember. So that one very small scene, it's not even a chapter on its own, it's part of the first part of a chapter 10, I think it is, really speaks volumes about what's important in writing and how we can know as much as we know, but we all have our own biases in reading and interpreting history. And obviously, therefore, you've put that's something really that's really important to you. So when you were researching yourself, how did you take care not to fall down any of those holes or into any of those traps? How do you ground yourself when you're doing that as an author?
I think what you have to do, which is where you started, you have to have a take. So, for instance, Henry, I have to have a version of him, and his version comes from a collection of things I've seen over a lifetime. Plus, I'm creating something that is somebody I want to lampoon a bit. So I suppose in a few sentences, what I arrived at is somebody, I mean, at one point somebody says, what a change of weather, he's like, oh come in my dud, and then he's shouting at you know, some of his ministers straight after. And at the same time, you know, we understand that his health is ailing, that he's dealing with many, many issues, that he can't really trust anybody. So, you know, part of it is growing in the story as well. A lot of the writing, so that if somebody said, well, I read your book and I giggled a bit at some of the things that Henry said and did, but it's not really him, I would say, yeah, fine. Because I'm doing a lot of what if. I've got this situation. How would he react in this sense? And I'm sorry to tell you, you will hate me for this, Catherine, but early on in book 2, we have a scene with Thomas Heneage, who was...
Oh no, la 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 la.
Yeah, you know, don't you? You know, don't you? So, you know, I'm just doing what is that? Because the mouse is saying, what does he really do? What is it really like? And unfortunately, he finds out, you know, and how bad tempered he is at this. So yeah, at times I reference things, but I suppose what I've done in writing, I'll go back a bit because I'm very much like that. I'm very much the person who will always say, even when I've been teaching, is that often, as I said before, it's very, very hard to find proof of anything. You've got to collect as much evidence as you can. You know, I remember when somebody, obviously having a little poke at me because it's something really untrue, was on about the Apollo missions and saying, well, you know, it's all made up and it was just done in a television studio. And I said, well, there's this and this. I said, mind you, I've only ever seen in a book on television.
Yeah.
You know, that's as much as mine. And if everybody could think in that way, because I've been recently watching a lot of stuff about trials in America, you know, and let's face it, again, I don't want to upset anybody, but, you know, without exaggerating it, there have been trials where the police have gone out, found somebody, manufactured evidence, stuck them and banged them in prison for 20 years, you know. So I sometimes watch documentaries, and I think if all the evidence is one-sided, and they're saying, however, you know, I'm a bit uncomfortable myself. So I suppose to answer your question, when I'm writing, and say I am writing a version of Anne Boleyn, which are quite cleverly skated around by having blokes in a pub talk about it rather than being
So
solid.
it's not you, it's them.
It's them. But even so, I said, you know, there was one point of view that, you know, he was wrapping around the little finger, and the other one was the opposing point of view, you know, because I think that's what history is. And I think that's what history is. It's where we are right now, isn't it? It's where Brexit was. You know, if you were to study, and God help anybody who studies Brexit in the future, but, you know, where do you find the truth? There weren't only two massively polarized opinions. There's all this stuff going on in the middle as well. So I think sometimes you've got to remember all history is like that. So you're quite right. As a writer, and I get into something and I'm doing that, well, this happened. I mean, quite clearly, I think it's reasonable to suggest on certain date, we know when Thomas Culpeper was executed, but to do it right at the beginning. You know, we have an account of his execution, but it was written by one of the people who put him there. You know, we don't have many varied accounts of it. So I played around with it a little bit, but I hold my hand up for anybody reading the book. There's a lot of artistic license in there, so,
Yeah.
so beware.
But I think that's valuable, because this is why people, I think the point is that because there's so many possible interpretations, this is the value in reading widely, and fiction as well as non-fiction. It's easy to think, oh, I've fallen into shop, I've got to read non-fiction because I've got to increase my knowledge, and I've got to stay on top of my game because of the things that I do. And but actually you do consolidate your knowledge through non-fiction if it's written well. And, you know, certainly I didn't know if you were going to talk about like Culpeper and Catherine Howard. I didn't, so I didn't mention it myself. But I was really surprised when he showed up. I was like, oh wow, where's this going to go? And it did make me look at them in a different way, and it was actually quite sad.
Yes.
Now, people might not agree with your interpretation of their
Yes,
story, but
absolutely.
it still stops and makes you think. I had this vision of him as a bit of a rogue, and and all this type of thing, which is generally how he's portrayed, isn't he? But actually, he wasn't just that person. It reminds you that those people that you may have one perception of still have human emotions and different sides and things like that. And there was a lot going on that we didn't know about. Certainly
Yeah.
the Culpeper in your book is a bit of a rogue and a geezer almost in
Yeah.
modern day terms. But
He's
it's
a
easy, I
romancer.
think, yeah, it's easy, him and the mouse, it's easy to forget and, like you say, layer on the opinions and ideals and things that we have now onto those people. But it was a different world, an
Yeah.
absolutely different world, whatever strata you were in. And certainly there at the top, it was treacherous a lot of
Yeah.
the time.
I think when you write fiction, like, as you say at that point, and I've done, and I'm going to comment on something else because I wanted to talk about it anyway, is that I wrote the story it was just as was. And I know some people have sort of said, oh, it goes back in time, goes forward, but it's just how it came to me. So I think for some people it's a struggle getting into it, but I knew anyway. It starts with Culpeper's death, but I knew it's going to be in it. When you're writing fiction, when he appears, I just have to make a choice. I have to say, who is he? Who's he going to be in my story?
Yeah.
Whether it's completely accurate or not, it could have been a complete rogue. He could have been stealing from everybody, and and it's like, well, I need him to play this role in it, And you probably know that, I've sort of there's this little carrot about Elspeth, has driven snow, and he tries flirting with her, and she's having none of it.
Mm.
But this ticks over in her head. So we go back, we revisit that in the second book. She finds herself alone in a room with her, and she doesn't like what she's thinking. So I'm sort of having fun with her, who's, as I say, is completely pure and some flaws. But he's actually doing quite a good deed in this scene, So, but again, I've got to make decisions about who they are and what they're doing, and yeah, there's plenty of fiction in there as well.
No, I really, he isn't somebody that I would generally warm to for all the, sort of the obvious reasons. But in this, I was, yeah. And you feel, when he comes in, you know from the outset he's doomed, and then he knows it as well, but he still continues what he needs to do. And it really does, at least even if people don't take that version of him, it's important to remind us that these people are people, and we
Yeah.
know so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's important to remember to be open-minded about these things. And I do think that fiction and novels do that. Really, that's possibly one of their most important things. They underpin the knowledge, because you'll talk about a certain location, an event in 1523, da 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 da.
Yeah. Yeah.
It reminds you, and this person's related to that person, because that gets confusing because they're all called the same thing. There was a line, everyone's called Thomas or
Thomas,
Edward.
another
And
bloody
there's a joke right back from the very beginning when the Tudor Tracker started, about how everyone's called Thomas, just everyone. And that really made me smile, because I was like, yes, exactly. And it makes it quite confusing. So with fiction, there's always things that consolidate your knowledge anyway.
Yeah.
But it's just that it brings people to life in a slightly different way, because you are able to see them more as people with their own emotions and nuances.
And part of it was this premise that we go way into our future and look at it. What would happen if you literally could walk in a room and you met Anne Boleyn? The likelihood is, the first thing you think, well, she don't quite look like I thought she would look, or not at all. All those presumptions, it is likely there will be things that, oh well, I didn't expect that, because we are building so much out, aren't we, out of these pieces that we've got. So that was part of the premise, the idea behind the book as well, that if you literally could, if we advanced technology and avatars, so we could get, at first they get just blurry images, but we actually see what these people look like and what they sound like. And I quite like this idea as well, which again is controversial, all of that when Henry first speaks, he's shouting at everyone. He's got this quite squeaky voice. The mouse has got a deep voice. He's got to
match the image at all.
Doesn't match the image of him. There's and again, I am definitely going back before your time, and probably lots of people are viewing. But when I was a kid, the BBC were very brave, and they put on a weekly drama called Henry VIII and His Six Wives, and a guy called Keith Michelle played Henry VIII, and he was absolutely astounding. And he played him at every age. And even to look at the Henry as an old man, you just think that's an older guy playing him. It was so successful, they made a movie out of it. And I think that coloured my version of him, because he made it funny. When he was angry, it was funny sometimes. There was that, I got that light and shade that he'd be talking calmly, that he'd just go rock it off on one, and the temper. So, as you say, everything we have comes from somewhere, and who knows how accurate it is or it isn't. But when you're writing fiction, you get to a certain point. There is a hell of a lot of what if, whatever. You get to a certain point, and you got to make choices. What is my version of this person going to say or do? And I ended up, and that wasn't always predictable. I ended up with Catherine Howard being pretty young and innocent and gullible, and probably in love with Culpeper, absolutely in love with Culpeper, and loving the king as well. A lot of versions, like she was appalled by him. But I thought, wouldn't that be interesting that she saw that as a different role at the same time as being unfaithful? And again, it was a choice. It's like, right, I'm at this bit.
I mean, we don't know, as you say, how she felt about the king, really. We're just surmising, and he was her monarch at the end of the day, so she may have felt almost like she had to have some love for him because of that. But sadly, so many things we will never know. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, because this is of interest to a huge number of people, so it's something that's really important to talk about, and I'm going to be talking to somebody else about it soon as well, is self-publishing.
Oh yeah.
Because you self-published your books, and this is such a fantastic thing to be able to do now, because it opens doors to so many people. Traditional publishing is great, and there's lots of different types of publishers now, but it can be an expensive and very lengthy process, and sometimes you have to make compromises that you don't want to make about the length of your book or the artwork or whatever that is. So did you do the whole process yourself, right from scratch?
Yeah.
Okay, that's brilliant. So can you just tell us a little bit about what you did with that, how you came to that conclusion, what you found easy and what you found challenging?
Yeah, I thought from the outset, like all of us, we have a lot of our lives where we've got people telling us what to do and creating parameters thing. It's very hard for anything that's creative. It's very difficult if and even that, I mean, I remember when I used to write these scripts for Thompson, now too. I go down to London, and we used to send this swish off office with managers, and they say, and I said, well, I've got these ideas of this, and then they said, well, can you include this and that? I said, can I write the rest of it? And we, without fail, I take it back and say, yeah, we're happy with it. So there was those freedoms, but I saw the idea of approaching publishers as one being something that's going to take up a lot of time. Two, you might not succeed. I think a lot of people aren't likely to succeed. And three, as you said, they're going to say, well, we like this, but don't do that or take that out. And the point is, it's not that it's precious. The point is, I want to write what I want to write.
Yeah.
And so I looked into this. I think there are parts of it that are difficult, and there are parts that are easy. And even about Amazon, I've got to say really that publishing a book is relatively straightforward. It's not a difficult process. They talk you through it. And I made this arrangement between myself and God and everything. When I've written this book, I'm very happy, if anything happens, for it to be organic. So that at first people I knew might buy a copy, and I got some printed as well. And I might sell a few online, and I signed some and some through Etsy. Etsy's right. People seem to be really nice on Etsy. They buy them as presents, or Christmas presents, and I signed them, and they write nice things. But that doesn't do a lot. And then what you get into, which is very, very difficult for most people, is the understanding that Amazon sales work using algorithms, usually based on the search terms of what people put in. And I'll be quite honest, as I do, I'm quite good with technology. I spent a lot of time studying it and doing that. Although I would buy ads and sell, I was not selling massive amounts, and I wasn't making a lot of money. Facebook ads have been completely different. Facebook ads are really well. At the moment, I'm not advertising on Amazon. I just use Facebook ads, and that has worked. And it's a lot easier. It's a lot straightforward. I'll just use like a photograph with some quotes and so forth. And of course, if anybody's going to do this, they haven't done it before. The downside as well, depending on your personality, is that you will sit there waiting for people to write reviews. Generally speaking, people don't. I think if they quite like it, they enjoy it, they don't. I've got some good reviews. There's some people who said some really nice things. And I'm very, very happy to people give me, I think there's a lot of things you could construct and criticize about what I've written. But for instance, the other day, the first time really I'd had a bad one, and somebody just went, I didn't understand any of this, it's rubbish. And you're looking at thinking, oh dear. But that's what happens. If you've got the right sort of personality, you think that's going to happen every so often, it's fine.
Absolutely.
Not so you I have, to be honest. I'm the person who, what have I done? What do I? But they're not going to be rewritten, so it doesn't matter, does it?
You
so
can't
that
appeal to everybody. It's as simple as that. It really is as simple as that. And it's hard, but you've got to let it go. And
it's the world we live in now. People are very vocal, aren't they, on social media and everything. I'll be quite honest, I'm not particularly used to that. And even with that, I was a bit sort of, I'll keep it small. So that Micklegate Series page was like, well, okay, then my friends were. So I am sort of working on that. And I didn't even think about Instagram. But what I do on Instagram, I just usually paste a picture and a quotation. And I was surprised at the traction I got on that. And the people comment and talk back, and they said, oh, I've got to read this book. Again, if you do it organically, it takes a long time, because if I can post one a day, one every other day, and then I'll get somebody else following me, So, but that's just slowly building up. But since the Facebook ads, that's been the biggest thing that's happened, I suppose, particularly during lockdown, but still now, the sales are quite healthy. So that's good.
See, that's good, because I've done, and I still occasionally do, but not as much as I used to, some work for an independent publisher called Made Global, who do mostly history books. And they obviously track the trends of sales. And obviously this is the perfect time, isn't it? Everyone's like stuck in and whatever. But even then, it's still been dicey for various reasons. Book sales haven't been superb the last year or two. There's been quite a big drop, even in ebooks. Comparatively, I think it's because there's so much stuff available for free now that sometimes people just latch on to that. And then of course you've got Kindle Unlimited and all sorts, and people are reading articles online and accessing content online maybe a bit more. So the fact that you've managed to use those resources and you're still building and seeing increasing sales is fantastic. So people, take this information away.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to exaggerate. It's not massive, but yeah, you know, I spend more money on ads, and they sell and I make some profit. You know, it's a little bit. I make a little bit of profit every day. I think one of the difficult things is, particularly in historical genres, is that you know, it's hard to say what it is, what I do is like. And even though, you know, somebody said, "Oh, Hilary Mantel writes," I said, "Well, Hilary Mantel writes brilliant stuff, but I'm not sure this is like it." You know, you probably would say, "Well, this isn't like that," and it's not like Philippa Gregory. So it is hard to picture. And I think anybody who thinks of doing this, I don't know. I wouldn't let something else dictate what you write. I wouldn't approve of that. But perhaps think ahead of how you're going to market it, because I find it difficult. I don't want to give up the whole story.
Yeah,
For instance, I mean, we've done it today, haven't we? But I do believe that in advertisements, I say, "Oh, there's a little mouse in it." I think the first thought is that's going to be pretty silly, you know, and in parts it probably is. But it is. I find it a little bit hard to market, or usually to talk about. If somebody says, "What's it about?" I usually go for the, well, it's about very ordinary people in a time where extraordinary things were happening, you know, in Tudor England, you know. So I usually go for that. But yeah, I think it can be done. And one of the other things I've only recently discovered is that, can't give you the reason, but you were talking mostly people who are buying it 45 upwards. And yet young people have written, I mean, friends of my sons that have written the book and have enjoyed it. So it's like, how do we get their attention? And I would imagine, generally speaking, the younger audience probably doesn't have as big a reader base as older ones, you know, generally speaking. But it's interesting. Again, I would love to know how you try and access those people, get them interested in ebooks or books a little bit more, or perhaps it's
yeah.
something about the book or what it looks like or the genre. I don't know.
It's a very, very tricky one, and certainly as people who work in the history world, and you know, it's something that we're always looking at, is how history can be presented very differently now than it was 20, 30 years ago or whatever. But it's still looking for ways, and we've got a lot to compete with now. You know, you've got computer games, endless television channels, consoles, you know, and so you could even try and create history games. So my oldest son's doing coding in various
Yeah,
different
cool.
platforms, including Roblox. And I was like, oh, maybe we could try and set some sort of history thing about, you know, teaching people about the Tudors. And he was like, well, who's going to want to play that? And I was like, people will want to play that.
And the
They
problem is,
will want. He's just was
the
like,
first thing you think is a sort of Games of Thrones conflict, constant battle thing, isn't it? As soon as you mention history and you pair it with games, that's what people think, isn't it?
yeah.
But
Right,
I
so
still there. I mean, the thing I would say from my Instagram account, I've a lot of people who followed me are young people with history degrees, people who write history are interested in it. So it is there, you know, there's plenty of young people who are very, very enthusiastic. And there's a lot of crossover. There are people who, like there's one woman who's very young, but she's an archaeologist, but she's into sex too. You know, it's not like she's a serious. So you can see that crossover between the different levels of engagement and history and Tudor history too. So that's been quite heartwarming as well, because, you know, I'm not a big fan of sort of saying, well, how many people can I phone up and say, like my Facebook page, like me on, because it's pretty meaningless, you know. So it's good that you're getting a little bit of feedback from, you know, that sort of audience too. Yeah.
we have to all keep developing
Yeah.
all these ideas. Right, thank you so much for your time today. I completely love your book. I've got this pile of stuff I need to read for other interviews, but I'm going to read this next.
Great.
I'm treating myself to another novel before I move on. I will, of course, enjoy all the other books, but just it's hectic at the moment, isn't it? And it's nice to sort of sit down and not feel like I'm desperately trying to retain pages of information on writing notes and things like that. And I really loved this one, and I will definitely come back and read it again. So definitely look at these. What I will do is when I put the video up in the show notes underneath and whatever, I will put like where they can get the books and the details.
Brilliant,
So
thank you.
when's the third one out?
Hopefully, I've said autumn, but I imagine in about a month it'll be done. Yeah, so I've been busy with that. Yeah, I'm pleased about it. So the only thing I would ask, if anybody does buy them and you like them, do a review on Amazon if you
Yes,
can. It's
I
helpful.
will. I
If
will
you
do a
hate it,
review
don't.
as well. Yeah, I
Thank
will
you.
do, because I have to do it quite quickly, otherwise I tend to not do it. And some people write amazing, like really brilliantly
They do,
structured
don't. Yeah,
reviews, and I'm
yeah.
not. I suppose I shouldn't compare mine to theirs because they're normally not as good. But they don't have to be like really long, an essay like in
It
beautifully
only has to be
structured.
what you thought about, what you felt. You know,
Yeah.
did you feel anything? Did you like anything? You know.
And that certainly leaving reviews, and even if you just leave like a star rating for something, depending on the
Yes.
platform, um that helps to bring you up more frequently in the algorithms and things like
It
that.
does. It's
Yeah,
helpful. It sounds a bit cynical, but unfortunately, it's the market that we're in. You know, and you know,
100.
I was reading about this, I suppose, coaching myself in this idea of there are going to be negative views, you know, and some very successful people who were saying, you know, at times that they've been hammered, and they're even a thing, I believe, that sometimes, you know, you can have people who literally try and sabotage, you know, by getting different people to bombard it with 1 stars. And it will affect, it's bound to affect, you know, it would affect me if I go on to look at a book and generally people say it's a lot of rubbish and I hate it. You would think twice, wouldn't you? So,
I know a few
sadly,
people who've been subject to that, and sometimes tragically as well, you can work out who's done it.
yes,
Um,
that's not nice, is it?
but it's a really difficult one, because sometimes the people who are engaging people in doing this for them are other people who are quite well known, and fortunately you don't get a lot of this, but it does happen.
I was
And
shocked when I read that, to be honest. I was shocked, but again, it's the world we live in, isn't it?
unfortunately it really, really is. And I don't think there's anything we can do about it,
No,
unfortunately.
no.
So, but don't be one of those people.
Yes,
That's the thing I
absolutely.
can say to you. Please don't be one of those people.
Be nice.
You know, because nothing's for everyone, is it?
Yeah.
Like whether it's a video or a book or a blog, or not everyone's going to like
But
it.
you know, Catherine,
Accept that.
I had a lady who got in touch with Micklegate page a few weeks ago, and she said, I'm liking this. I've only got so far. I don't understand this. And to be honest, once she watched it and understand it, I said, oh yeah, right. And I said, well, this is what's happening. And she said, oh, thanks. And I just thought, well, I'm very accessible. If you're stuck with a book, you can always tell me. You don't need to
Yeah.
kind of, but anyway,
Yeah,
that's the
that's
prerogative,
definitely
isn't it?
something that's a new thing now, because years ago you'd never be able to access an author in any
No,
way, would you?
no, you wouldn't. You wouldn't.
No,
And I think it's a good
absolutely.
thing. You know, I'm quite happy to discuss
Yeah.
any element of it, even if people say, well, I wasn't happy. Well, this character did this. I don't mind. You know, they're my people. I'll discuss anything if they want to. Know
Right.
where to
So
find me.
you're going to get inundated now. Now you said that. Oh dear. Well, yes, keep me posted
Will do.
as to when the book's out. We will definitely have a look at that, and I shall look forward to it, because obviously I'm going to have read the next one, so I shall be waiting
Brilliant.
for the last one to
Thanks so
come
much,
out.
Catherine. I do appreciate it.
We've had a lovely chat. We had, as always,
Yep.
everyone knows this, I tend to have a big chat with the person before we come on, and just we've had a lovely chat this
We have. It's
morning.
been great. Thank you.
So, and hopefully you'll come back again another time.
I'd love to. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Brilliant.
I'll
So
see you soon.
thank you very much, everybody, for watching. And obviously you can get hold of Rob anytime. You've just heard it straight from the horse's mouth. So yeah, I'll put all that information about how to contact you underneath so that people can find that. But enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thanks
And
very
I
much,
will
Catherine.
speak to you soon. Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.